I wanted to talk about my daughter Hazel. This might be a little long winded. I'm not going to edit this, so forgive me for rambling. But my wife and I, we found out that we were pregnant this last September, and we just had a miscarriage a couple months ago. So the realization that things might not work out was very, very real for us. Um, the miscarriage over the summer, we were about 7 weeks along, and it was pretty tough. So the moment that we found out that we were pregnant with our daughter Hazel, we got real nervous. We didn't get too excited. We just kind of waited to see what might happen until we got to at least the 12 weeks mark, something like that. And at about that point, when we got to go and actually see the heartbeat, that was a really, really exciting moment for us because all of a sudden, this felt real. It was real before, but this just kind of um, it was it for us. We were in love right off the bat. And week after week, Taylor got to feel more kicking, more activity, and it was really cool. She would tell me, "Hey, come over here and feel this," and immediately statue baby. The moment the dad touches, she's not moving. But I just kind of told myself, you know what, that's fine. I'll wait till she gets here. It'll be worth the wait. And at about week 36, my wife had my wife had an appointment, and she went in, and everything seemed fine. And so she came home today. I had my appointment. Everything looks good. No big deal. But then that day, that same day, just a number of hours later, she realized I haven't felt Hazel move in a couple hours. Maybe she had been, but I'm just not feeling it. I don't remember it. I don't remember the last time that it happened. It must have been 3 o'clock, and at this point, it was the evening. So we just said, okay, that's fine. The doctor says that she is supposed to kick, give or take 10 times within a given hour. So we'll just wait. We'll count the hour, and we'll see what happens from there. So sat down, watched some TV, just killing time, and nothing happened. We didn't feel anything. So we went over to the ER, and from there, they took us into the room. The nurse came in. I sat down on the seat over on the side because we were thinking this. We're freaking out about nothing. You just need to relax. But then the nurse came in and started checking for a heartbeat, and she wasn't getting anything. She said, "Well, I don't want to get you guys nervous because I'm just not. I'm not the best at this. Let me go get the doctor and give her a shot." And after the doctor she had been doing a C-section at the time, she came in and she took a chance to see if she could figure out what was going on. And we could see the little thing on the screen, and we eventually saw that she was looking directly at Hazel and looking directly at this little circular P right where her chest is, and it wasn't moving. And it was in that moment that we had the unfortunate news that our little girl was not going to be born alive. So, in that moment, my wife and I, we both we experienced this very differently. I just kind of stared at the screen, and I didn't move. I didn't react. It felt very surreal. And my wife, she just started wailing. She was just, she was having a hard time. Just, why us, why? And then we were told that we would need to go. We were given the option to um, just expedite the birth and get this thing taken care of. So that's exactly what we did. We went ahead and decided that we would just start this as soon as we could. And before we wanted to contact our jobs to let them know that we wouldn't be in the next day, we knew that we wanted to talk to our family. And so called my parents, called her parents, and we just kind of we listened to them cry as well. I say as well, but really, after those calls, we let them know, and they said that they were gonna come up the next day because we told them just to stay where they were. Um, but we just kind of looked at each other, and we were jealous because we were in shock. So we had not cried at all. We weren't crying. We were just sitting there. She was wailing, but no tears. I had no tears. It felt, um, I don't know. We don't know what it felt like. So after they came in, they got us situated, and we we knew the plan. We knew what was going to happen, and they said they started and this all started at 10 o'clock at night. So about midnight, they started a medication that would start contractions to start getting this thing going. And then that would be something that they would administer every 6 hours just to really, just to get this thing going. And once they left and my wife and I had the chance to just really sit there with ourselves, that's when we lost it. We weren't able to sleep at all that night. We just, without conscious thoughts, we were just sitting there. We were crying. We were upset. Like I said before, there's just no conscious thoughts. It was just, this isn't real. We're going to wake up from this thing. It's not actually, this isn't the world we're living in. This has to be a dream. This is so unreal. And unfortunately for us, it was very, very real. And that night, I don't know if I've ever felt closer to my wife, and the same with her and me. It's being in that circumstance, just the intensity and just the reality of what you're going through. There's only one other person who's in that same boat as you, and we loved each other and wanted each other to be okay, despite the fact that we were just handling this very differently. I was initially in shock. Shock came a little bit later for her, and I really just took on the intense emotions right off the bat. So that night, I didn't realize it was possible to cry as much as I did. I was crying constantly. I might kind of have a moment, but then I just break down even more. Eventually, like I laid on the hospital bed right next to her, and we slept for. I slept for probably 5 minutes. She got 30 minutes of sleep, but that was it that night. That was it. And by the time 6 a.m. rolled around, every 30 minutes even, we would just think, is that all the time that's passed? Because by the time the sun was coming up, I swear we had to have been there for 3 or 4 days. Just time moved so slowly. Every single moment, we just soaked in those moments. And on one hand, I was devastated. But at the same time, knowing there's nothing I could do, I did find maybe a little bit of solace knowing that I am experiencing these intense emotions because I love my daughter so much. I didn't realize that at the time, but I just, even though we'd never met face to face, the most I've ever had was a couple little kicks here and there, and I loved her more than words could ever express. But it was at 6 a.m. that we just kind of gave up, and we realized we're awake. There's no use even trying to sleep. And since Taylor was going to be going through what she was only able to have some Jello and things like that. And they were asking me, "Hey, do you want any food?" And I couldn't eat. I couldn't eat anything. My wife would have some Jello. I would have like a bite or two just for the sake of flavor, but I couldn't eat. My wife's family came in. We spoke with them for a little bit. There wasn't much to say. And the same thing when they left and my family came in. Just wasn't much to say. We just kind of sat there and just kind of waited for the next thing. My family, I feel like we mostly just sat there pretty quiet watching on the screen as her contractions took place. She had an epidural, so that made things quite a bit better for us because we couldn't be strong emotionally, let alone like the physical piece of it. So after quite a bit of time, it rolled around to being 6:35. Before that, she started pushing. She did the whole thing, went through the whole process, and my little girl was born, not breathing, without a heartbeat, at 6:35 on May 19th. She was 6 pounds, 8 ounces. And as she was going through that process and she was pushing, I felt like a failure as a husband because she was doing all of this work. She was pushing, she was doing this stuff, and I was just sitting there like unable to control myself. I was just sobbing because we knew that given the circumstances, given that there was a miscarriage, which at this point we still don't know. We didn't know then what happened, but we didn't know what she was going to look like. We didn't know if there was going to be something obviously wrong that we wouldn't have known about. But eventually, Hazel came through, and they held up our little girl, and it was the most perfect thing I'd ever seen in my life. People would always say, this is my baby. She's so beautiful. And I would just look at it and think, glad you like it. It's cute, I guess. Little alien people that in a couple months they'll look, more human. But no, my daughter, she was everything that I hope she could be and more. And they took her, they cleaned her up, they put some clothes on her, and we let our family know that, she's alive now. She's born, not alive. And they went over, they cleaned her up, they brought her back to us, and they brought out something called the cuddle cot, which it's a bassinet with a cooling pad on the bottom to help maintain the integrity of our little girl, so we would be able to have the autopsy and the testing done once we had the time to really spend with her. And So that's kind of all we did. We held her and we sobbed, and we just couldn't believe that we created something that was this beautiful. She was everything I would ever want. Even I brought this in here. For years, I made fun of my wife for having the the toe next to her big toe was longer than her own toe, and we realized that Hazel had the same thing, and that was a feature I always made fun of my wife for. But the moment I saw that, all I could think is, this is every piece of this is perfect. I couldn't change anything. And fortunately for us, I didn't know this was a thing, but there's an organization called Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. And what they do is, for free, they come and they take baby pictures of babies that are in the same circumstances Hazel. And I really wasn't sure what to expect. And they asked us, "Would you like this?" And we're like, "I don't know. It seems strange. I don't know." But ultimately, we decided, if we don't have it and we want it, then no harm, no foul. But if we end up not having them and we would have wanted them, we would be devastated. So we told them, yeah, we want to do that. And we just waited. We held her. We touched her face and everything, and like the softest. I don't think I've ever felt anything as soft as her cheeks. They're just so soft. And we later had my friend Father Michael come in to see her, and it was around the same time that the Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep person had come in. And I have to say that her name was Sammy. She was really special. She did a really good job. She came in at 10 p.m. because apparently she had been at a another shoot somewhere else earlier in a town about an hour south of us, and she was told about this, and it was a situation where they said, "Hey, could you come and do this tomorrow?" And she said, "No, I'm not going to do this tomorrow. She's going to look the best today, so I'm going to go today." So even knowing she was doing a shoot an hour south of us, and she lived 40 minutes south of that place, she came up at 10 o'clock and stayed until 11 something, and just took pictures. And I really didn't know what to expect, but she did a really good job. So the pictures that we've only got a couple back so far because we wanted to have some available for the funeral, and they look great. They look really great. Because, before we're sitting there, we're looking at her, and since there's no blood flow, there's no anything like that. There's not really any muscle tone. So even just finding the best way to lay her down so she looked peaceful was kind of difficult. But she knew exactly what she was doing. She brought in her lights. She just watching her hold this baby was powerful. It was big. And after all things are said and done, we couldn't be any happier with how things turned out, because our beautiful baby girl, we got to see those images. We got to preserve those moments in time in a way that most people don't. So I'll include a link in the description, because this organization, like I said, is free. and we could afford it, but a lot of people can't. So Taylor and I decided we would make $1,000 donation to this organization, and if you can, I would love for you to do the same. But so after this, we held on to her, and we just held each other, cried, and at about, I want to say, 1 o'clock in the morning, we told the nurse, hey, it's time for her to go. And so the nurse came in. They wheeled her out, and the time we spent with our little girl, I will hold dear forever. And fortunately, my grandmother, she used to work at a funeral home, so she was in connections with people. So getting the funeral set up for her, it went pretty smoothly. And sorry, notification here. So then we the next day, which fortunately I had my sleeping pills that night, and I got the medically induced 3 hours of sleep that night. So then we went over the next morning. We went to the as soon as we got dismissed, we went over, and at about, I guess it was 1 o'clock, we met over at the funeral home, and we went over everything, and it felt so wrong. I never felt like I would I never felt like I would be making those decisions at my age for my child. So we went through, and when I was there, Father Michael called me and talked about, all the details, and there wasn't much that we needed to do. I just knew that for the funeral, as far as the arrangements, there was a song called Pie Jesu that I had said for years to my wife that when I die, I want this played at my funeral. And I always thought, I want this played at my funeral, and it was strange to think that I'm making a decision for this thing, one of my most favorite songs of all time. I made that decision that I wanted this played at my funeral, but I would never hear that come to fruition. And my daughter, I had to I made this decision for her. And so when I spoke with Father Michael about arrangements, I told him I would like the song played if possible. And he's like, okay, the person that we'll have play, we'll see if she can learn it, which I didn't have high hopes because, as the name kind of implies, it's Latin. It's Pie Jesu, qui tollis peccata mundi, dona eis requiem. Pious Jesus, you take away the sins of the world, grant us rest. But then we went back to, once I hung up the phone, I walked back into the room, and Taylor was talking to the owner of the funeral home. I don't think he's the owner anymore, but I don't know what his role would be. But we spoke to him, and we were looking at the casket, which this big, 24 inches wide. And he talked about people getting pallbearers and everything. And I just kind of disappeared for a little bit as soon as he was talking about that. And he stepped out of the room to go get some ideas for the pamphlets for the funeral. And I knew in that moment that despite how terrifying the idea would be, I'm going to carry my little girl down the aisle. I'll never get to walk her down the aisle at her wedding or anything like that. I'm never going to get to show her how strong her dad is. So this is my one shot. So made sure that the casket wasn't something that I couldn't handle, because I no matter how hard this was going to be, I told myself I'm going to do this. So we let the guy know, and he said, "Yeah, that'll be fine. It's light. You can do that." And then the next couple days, it's as of today, it's been a week, but it feels like it's been 3 or 4. Just time runs together, and had some family around, spent some time with them. And they lost something too. They lost a niece. They lost a granddaughter. But I still don't feel like I was there. And at this point, my wife, she was having a difficult time. I definitely had a much harder time right then. Mostly because just being the person that I am, if I'm watching a movie, I am engaged. If I am listening to music, I am engaged. If I'm in a conversation, I am engaged. I'm somebody who if something is there, I am entirely in it. And that meant that in this moment, I was entirely in this grief. I felt everything, and I wouldn't change it for the world, because that was me loving my daughter. So after some time went by, just a couple days, it rolled around to Friday, where we had the funeral. And before I get to that point, the way how I was handling grief, there were a couple things I was just very, very fixated on. Number one was, I'm going to carry my daughter. The other part was, for whatever reason, I want to look good for her. For years, I'd been wanting to get a suit. I'd been putting it off, and I kept putting it off. And then Friday morning, I went over with my brother, and we went to a store, and we picked up the suit. Price tags irrelevant. I found exactly what I wanted, and I was going to buy that, and I was going to wear that. And I don't know why that was so important for me, but for whatever reason, it was the most important thing in the world for me, that I look good for her. So, and my wife, she looked wonderful as well. So we went over went to the church, went through all the stuff. We had all these flowers, and so we went in early, and they wrote all the cards off to us. And my wife's friend from when she was in high school, I think she went to prom with him. That Thursday, he was ordained as a deacon, and he contacted us and asked if he could participate in our daughter's funeral. And that was a very, very special thing for Taylor, and it was special to me. And of course, like I said, Father Michael, he was involved in all this, and he's a good friend. So I'm glad that of anybody who would, lead the mass at her funeral, that it could be a friend, and that meant a lot. So we went in, and after a little bit of time, people started funneling in, and we didn't know what to do. So we were off to the side. We didn't want. We wanted to talk to people, but we knew we just really couldn't right then. So we decided we would move into the Adoration Chapel, and we went in and there was 2 people in there already. We just sat off to the side, and the woman who's sitting there, after we were there for we just sat in silence for 15 minutes, just waiting. And then the woman there said, "Hey, can I ask whose funeral this is? Because I would like to pray for their family." So we told her it's ours. It's our stillborn little girl. And and immediately she just reached over and she started fumbling through her purse and said, "Hey, well, in the Magnificat, which, long story short, it's these biblical readings and things like that they would send out regularly." She said, "Well, this was written in Magnificat this past week, and I wanted you to have it." So she tore it out and handed it to us, and it was about dealing with loss of specifically a child, and that I don't even remember what it said. Just the circumstances were. It meant a lot to us. I don't know the lady's name. I don't think she knows our name, and I don't think she will. But that was a very special moment. And then afterwards, we loaded up, or we got all the people inside, and we got together, and then they were playing music, and it was a moment that went right back to me carrying my daughter, because it was like the moment that if the closest thing I could have to walking her down the aisle. So we stood in the back, said, "Everybody turn towards the back." And that's the moment when I reached down and I picked up her casket to walk her down the aisle. Without a doubt, it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I was wearing a mask because of COVID-19, and I'm glad I was, because I don't even want to know what my face looked like. Making sounds I'd never made in my entire life. I was just sobbing the entire way, just thinking, the entire time just thinking, "I've got you. We're going to do this." And I brought her up to the front, put her down, and we were seated. My brother did the readings, and as a kid, I remember thinking, Mass takes so long. It's 45 minutes in the mind of a child. It's so long. We're here forever. But the entire event just flew by unbelievably quick. And then we went up for communion. And I went back to my seat, and that's in the moment that I realized that there wasn't any singing, but they found an arrangement for Pia Jesu. And that was really, really special to me. It was very, very powerful. And from that moment on, I don't really know what happened. Time went by, and they started playing music, and I knew that it was the exit song. So I walked back up, and I carried my little girl out of the church, which no parent should ever walk their daughter down the aisle and have to walk her back. And we had made the decision that we wanted to drive her to the cemetery. And we were going to have it in my hometown, but the church was so small that we knew we needed more space. But we were still going to bury her in that same cemetery. So for us, we ended up with the opportunity of my wife sat in the passenger seat. She buckled up, and I put the casket on her lap. Then I stepped into the car, and then we just sobbed. We just lost it. It was really, really hard. And we followed the hearse there. And up at this point, it was the worst day of my life. The worst day. But my wife and I, one thing we did a lot, whenever we would have like vacations, we rarely did the whole, we're going to go to like a resort and do all this stuff. And that's just not something we really did. We had, but that wasn't the norm for us. We were more weekend trip type people. We would relax together. We would hop in a car, just cruise. And on our honeymoon, that's all we did is we got in the car. We drove to Kansas City. We had a good time there. We drove to Arkansas, spent time there, and just without a plan, it was just us in the car, and that was something we had. So after we started driving, we didn't talk a whole lot right in the moment. We just played the new Josh Garrels album, which had become the soundtrack to our grieving. And we just enjoyed our time as a family. We just drove for the 30 minutes on a day when it was supposed to be, I'd heard it was supposed to be rainy, it was supposed to be all this stuff, but the weather was wonderful and the sky was beautiful. And we got to drive. We just followed the hearse those 30, 35 minutes to the cemetery. And that drive, without a doubt, is the best 30 minutes of my life. The chance that we had to spend with our little girl, I would never trade away for anything. And that 30-minute drive felt so short, but it was everything to me, and it was everything to my wife. So by the time we got to the cemetery, crying was done. I was so happy that I'm assuming it made some of the people at the cemetery uncomfortable because they don't know about the moment that we had. They don't know that we had the experience of having our family time that we always had. So we showed up and everyone gathered around, and we had all these helium balloons, and we passed them all out to everybody, and then all together we just let them go. I remember whenever my wife, it was her idea, and when I told her, when she told me, she said, I know it's going to sound corny, but we should do this. And in my mind I was thinking, yeah, it's corny. It's super corny. But I love that we did that. Whatever it meant, I don't know. But that moment was significant, that it was like the final goodbye. So then we went home. And we spent some time with some friends, spent some time with some family. And I kind of felt like, yeah, we're going to cry every day for a while. That's how it's going to be. We're going to cry every day. And that's just how it is. And like I said before, my grief was very intense and things lightened up quite a bit afterwards. But my wife, it's it's going to be a long, drawn out process, and it's going to be really hard. And I know it's going to be the little things that just really set us off. So she had one of my wife's cousins came over, brought her 4-year-old son. It was nice to have the distraction, and we looked over, and we were just. She was talking to him, and I was looking over at him and following him around the house. And then he stepped over and said, "Hey, whose room is that?" I said, "That's Hazel's room." She said, "Where is she?" And I just told him she's not here. Like, where is she? And I didn't say anything. I think I might have said it's hard to explain, and then I just kind of walked away, and that was that. It's gonna be difficult, and I don't know if or when it's gonna get any easier. So ultimately, things will be better. But the thing that's interesting about the whole experience is a lot of people, when they go through things like this, they would say something along the lines of, "Why would God do this? Why would He kill our child? Why would He do this thing?" And there were some people, even at the funeral, that said things like, "I don't know why God does this." And that wasn't really a difficulty for me, because that's bad theology. The reality is, anything that is good is of God. Any blessing that you receive is of God, whether you know it or not. Whether that be an atheist who's having a good day or whatnot, that's a gift. That's a grace. That's a blessing. So, looking at everything, just the realization that in the book of Job, he will let things happen that are not good, but those things are not of his doing. So, for whatever reason, he blessed us with the opportunity of 36 weeks of our child living within my wife, and blessed us with the opportunity to be able to hold our little girl. As small as amount of a time as it was that we had, it was a blessing that we would never trade away for anything. I know this is a little strange because I don't have a way to end this. I just know that we wanted to put this out here because people were given some details on what actually happened, like the loss, but this is the full story. And someday we want to meet her again. So pray for us, pray for our family. And if you've got kids, go hug them, love them. And thank you for watching.